Welcome to MSP Unplugged, episode number 13, Security Stack for 2020. I'm your host, Jeff Halash. This is our live show where we discuss the different ways to run your IT business, whether it's managed services, consulting, break fix, or anything in between. Our show today is brought to you by Instant House Call, remote support that is easy to use. You have free auto PC repair to track down and kill unwanted viruses. You also have free sub accounts to let your customers control their own PCs from home. Special discount for listening to MSP Unplugged, half price off for the first 3 months, or 2 additional months free on a yearly subscription. To claim your discount, go to instanthousecall.com, sign up for your free 15-day trial, then email Corey at instanthousecall.com and tell him you're an MSP Unplugged listener. Let me introduce the co-hosts. We have Paco Lebron from ProdigyTeks. Paco, how you doing?
Better than good.
And we also have Alex Chamandy from Envescent. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay. All right. I remembered.
There you go.
How you doing, Alex?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. All right, let's go ahead and start off the show. We're going to share a tip or story that we could learn from. And Paco, I'm going to kick it off to you.
Yep. So another tip or actually information from our good friends over at Synchro. Ian shared with me a link where basically they are trying to do whatever they can to help the IT community in an effort that is not very sales-ish, or it's not trying to like, hey, buy this and get X amount free and, you know, things like that. So what they did was they actually created a job board for the community. So basically, there's two ends to this whole situation that we're currently in. For those listeners listening in the future, the COVID-19 and coronavirus stuff. So there's the one side where there are IT businesses that are so busy and they just don't have the capacity to handle all the work. And then there are those that are either not getting a lot of work or are trying to figure out how to make ends meet, because their IT business had taken a dive pretty early on. This MSP IT business job board allows for both. It allows for those to post jobs that are necessary, need help in the area. And then in reverse, it also allows them to find any work if they're available. So the website is msp-jobs.com. I'll put it here in the chat. But yeah, so if you guys are on either side, just favorite it, keep a lookout if you're looking for work. And if for those that are, you know, not trying to go through the Indeeds, the career builders, Facebook posts, Craigslist, you want to go ahead and, you know, use the job board. It's created by the community. You know, it's people that are similar minded, that are finding out about this because it's growing organically through the ways that we can through the community.
That is awesome to hear. That's, yeah. It's great how everybody's coming together during this crisis, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, and helping each other out. And Synchro, through all their iterations of companies for years, have been doing a great job for looking out for the community first, and that's great to hear. All right, Alex, what do you have for us this week?
So with COVID-19, and I think that might be a persistent theme that we talk about a little bit here, but with COVID-19, one of the things that we're seeing in the cybersecurity world is an increase of phishing and ransomware attacks, up about 667% than before the pandemic. And so one tip I'd like to share, both for anyone who's in the IT field that's listening and anyone who's in a business of any kind that has email, which is pretty much all of them, is to consider setting up DMARC. And so DMARC is a policy framework that involves SPF and DKIM. And what it basically does is ensure that when you're sending an email, it's validated. And if someone isn't sending an email that's authorized to send it, it's going to be bounced by the majority of recipients. Because a lot of these phishing attacks are trying to exfiltrate information or trying to infect computers, and often is the case they're trying to spoof domains. And compounding that, people are working from home, so a lot more communication is happening over email. Having DMARC in place can be a big improvement over the baseline level of security that email affords. And there's a lot of great documentation out there, but there's also companies, you know, providers, even ourselves, that will help a company set that up and make sure that it's fully tested. So that would be my recommendation. And then on the other side of it, make it maybe a two-part tip. If people are on Office 365, set up advanced threat protection. It's only about $2 or $3 a month per mailbox, and it provides on the receiving side more security against those types of attacks.
Very good.
Yep. To key off of that, there is actually a vendor that's makes it pretty painless called Demarcian, DMARCIAN.com. They're actually going to be on the show May 17th as well. But I can't express how DMARC has really assisted in a lot of the legitimacy of emails. And especially with now, like you just mentioned, Alex, like that's one of the ones that I kind of was trying to standardize on getting the SPF, the SPF, the DKI. I'm in my used car automotive software days, SPF, DKIM, and then doing the DMARCs as well.
Very cool. All right. And I guess my tip is basically learn something new. Everybody probably has a lot of downtime out there right now, and maybe you're busy, but a lot of us are busy from home. And so because you're busy from home, you might be able to do a couple different things. I don't know, maybe remotely working on a computer while you're learning a new language, or learning how to, I don't know, basically better cybersecurity techniques, or working on back-end paperwork type things. Anyways, learn something new. Even if it's just something you want to do, because that also helps during this time where a lot of people are looking at this time and they're stuck in their homes and they're bummed and they want to get out. Me, I'm having the time of my life. I really don't want to be around people at all anyways. So this works out perfectly for me. We can sit here on the internet and just talk and have a great time, and I can shut my camera off and go back to doing whatever I was doing. But no, I get it. There's human interaction is very, very important. So with that, I'm going to go into our real quick advertisement, and then we'll get into our main topic, because I think we have a lot to cover, and I'm not sure we're going to get it all covered in this show, to be honest with you. But we'll see how far we get. Join us for the 2020 annual TechCon Unplugged, bringing community together. Get away from your business for a weekend of learning, fun, and new relationships, and a getaway retreat. Join like-minded business owners to help your IT business thrive. Hear from experts and get one-on-one time with peers facing the same challenges you are. Walk away with concrete action items to take your business to the next level. September 25th through the 27th, 2020. It's later this year. Get plenty of time to get tickets, hotel rooms, and all that kind of stuff. It's in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Very easy place to get to, fly, or drive. Go to techconunplugged.com. Tickets are $199, and it will definitely be worth it. We had a great time last year, and we hope to do more of the same, but better. And hopefully just getting together and hanging out with our peers has been a lot of fun. Again, I think by that time, we'll all want to get out of the house and go do something. So perfect opportunity. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about our main topic. And what we're going to talk about today is, we talked about a security stack for 2020. And basically, what do we use to defend our clients? We're going to talk about some things, maybe some processes and things that we put in place to better help our clients be secure out on the web, out on the internet. And with that, we might mention some products that we use. And this is not the end all be all, but this is just what works for us. And I'm going to preface all this by saying, you need to find out what's going to work for you, because everybody's a little bit different and everybody's processes might be a little bit different. So just because somebody talks about one product or service they use, hey, check it out, see if it's going to work for how you work. And if it does, then go ahead and get on board with that. And then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to learn that product inside and out, so that you know it backwards and forwards, upside down on your head, and you can actually help your clients when they need help, and it makes your life that much easier. So don't be one of these people that jumps around to, every new thing every new slice of bread and thing that comes out, every new shiny object that looks pretty and looks like it's fun to play with. It's always fine to play with stuff. Play with it on your own machine. And then if it's going to work, move it along to your clients. All right. So let's talk about things like defense, cybersecurity, security in general. There's physical security. There's, network security. There's a lot of things that go into security, and hopefully we'll touch on some of the different areas today. But before we get started with the list that I have put together of different things that might be security wise, I'm going to ask Alex first. Alex, when it comes to security, what things come right to the front of your mind, or how would you define security in today's day and space?
It's a great question, Jeff. And I think before I talk about any product specifically, I want to talk about policy. Every company really needs to have an information security policy, and also, in light of COVID-19, a business continuity plan as a part of that policy as well. I think that the foundation for every cybersecurity initiative is really having it all defined in writing, and then making sure that everyone at the company is aware of it, that they're trained on it periodically, that it's updated as trends change, as technology and the business itself changes. And then from there, it's a matter of really having that sort of framework define everyday operations. How is the company going to handle private data? How are they going to compartmentalize that data? How are they going to have the expectations set forth for, how employees behave if they feel that they've encountered a threat? Are they going to escalate it to IT? Is there an automation in place that they trigger? Those are the sort of things that need to be defined, as well as backups. How are they running their backups, and how is that defined in the policy? Even though it's not often talked about as an element of security, having backup is a really important part of continuity for a business, and how that backup is managed, if it's encrypted, if it's off-site, if it has retention, is another really important part. So I always like to, whenever I train clients or whenever I talk to prospects, really hammer home policy first.
Excellent. And Paco, what does cybersecurity mean to you, or what does security mean to you in your business?
This is a security show? No, I mean, I think the biggest piece, like going kind of what Alex had mentioned, is getting a policy in place, right? Is understanding what you're trying to do instead of just stacking a bunch of tools and, shotgunning it and hoping for the best, right? So there is actually a resource. So I personally follow the NIST cybersecurity framework. That's kind of my baseline of what I try to do and adhere to on all of when I think security, I try to do that. And there are many other frameworks and cybersecurity options that people can follow or try to, make as their baseline. And there's some that are more complex. There are some a little bit that, work with different areas. And then there's those with compliances as well that have their own realm of, frameworks that you have to adhere to, right? So PAX 8 actually came out with a very clever one that kind of highlights the 5 different steps, which is identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, because I can never remember them when I'm trying to talk about them. But what they have done is they actually have identified tools in their distribution list that adhere to one of those sections, or all those sections, or a few of those sections. So I will put that in the chat as well. But what I mentioned that because specifically, if you don't like that tool, or if you don't like what they're suggesting, at least you have an idea of a tool that's similar that either you have in your own stack or that you can go look for. So this was a very visual framework image, and it was very dynamic and interactive as well. So if you click on it, it'll tell you the several different things. But I thought it was pretty helpful for those that are trying to at least get those 5 different sections answered. Because that's basically what you want to do, is you want to help your clients be able to answer those 5 questions. You're not responsible for those 5 questions. You want to be able to assist on the IT side of answering those 5 different questions.
Excellent points. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to go down a list, and we're going to talk about the products that we use and any type of in-depth information that we have when thinking about using said products, and it could be past examples of things that you've used in the past, or things that you need to look for when you're looking at these products in protecting your end client. And the first one would be endpoint or antivirus software. So who wants to start?
I can start.
Go ahead. Go ahead. All right, I'll take it. So I right now favor Malwarebytes endpoint protection for cloud. It seems to have really comprehensive detection capacity. The reporting is excellent, and the management panel where you can see real-time updates as to what the conditions of each computer and server you're managing is pretty intuitive. And I found that when something does go wrong, Malwarebytes seems to have pretty good support. And I've long liked, back from my residential computer repair days, the Malwarebytes tool. I mean, we've all used it to remove really difficult malware. So I felt, the natural iteration might be, hey, let's look at their commercial product. And I have to say, I have not been disappointed.
Excellent. Paco?
So I'm currently using Silence Protect. That is the AV that I'm currently using. I have used quite a few in the past. I just like this one because I am going through a vendor called Solutions Granted, which, quick plug, they will also be on the show in May. But they were able to give this to me. So I've always wanted to go get Silence, but the problem with Silence is I never had a clear direction on how to either trial their stuff or get a hold of someone to, figure out the pricing or whatever the case may be. So which is why I went through Solutions Granted, who made it a lot easier for me to do. And, for me, it was one, easeability of use. So being able to look at a dashboard and understand what the heck is happening. Two, it allows me to give a lot more granular details with some of the things that I'm trying to look at. As far as what's been picked up, whether it's, is it fileless? Is it something else? Is it a script that's running? It helps identify a lot of those very easily for me. And allows me to better understand what's being help train the quote unquote AI to get it to protect better for a lot of the clients, depending on the client's environment.
All right. And I will say mine, Windows Defender, of course. Oh, wait, that's called, is it Microsoft Defender now? I'm not
Microsoft
sure.
Defender.
Okay. Or just Defender. That's a video game. So I personally, on the residential side, if somebody doesn't want to pay for an antivirus, and let me say this, there are a lot of commercial antivirus suites that will bog even a high-end computer down pretty easily. So I'm kind of a little bit on the side of, hey, let's keep it simple. And here's the thing. Pretty much every computer that has any type of malware or whatever on it has had every iteration of antivirus, anti-malware on the system. It didn't matter, because here at the end of the day, if a person clicks on something, I don't care what's protecting it for the most part. Now, some things do better than others depending on what it's doing. But when it comes to the residential side, I will say I really do. Windows Defender, even back when it was, Microsoft Security Essentials, I think, back in the day, Windows 7 time era, actually Windows XP, Windows 7 time era. And I'll tell you what, it blew a lot of stuff away, even though everybody's like, oh, we got to use this, we got to use that. Now, here's the thing. When you're talking about managing antivirus, you can't really do that with Windows Defender. Not easily. There might be some scripts and things you can do to get that to make it happen. So on my managed side, I actually, and a lot of people are going to laugh, I actually still use Viper. Yes. Vipre. Yes. Viper. Why? Because it still works. It does what I need it to do. And here's where this is one point of security that is not going to do everything on its own. You're going to have to stack. In other words, that's why we're talking about the stack today. You're going to have to stack other things on top of that, in between that, over and under it, in order to make sure that you are secure for the most part. So, but those are the two that I use right now. I do throw, a paid version of Malwarebytes on there. So the endpoint protection will run in the background along with Windows Defender, or even if somebody's using something like WebRoot or something like that, because a lot of times for residential side, people will bring in computers and they've still got 2 years left on the subscription service through whatever antivirus they're using. And to me, they're all about the same. So it doesn't really matter. And so I just kind of go, hey, if that's what you want on there, we're going to get rid of the other 4 that you downloaded and slowed your computer down for. And I know this is old school stuff because a lot of people are going like, what the heck's he talking about? What do you mean people put antiviruses on their computers? And I thought you could get away with that nowadays. Well, no, you can't, because it still slows down the heck out of your computer. So there's that.
I would also say that when you have multiple antivirus products, it actually adds more attack surface to your computer because each one has vulnerabilities, and Norton especially, at least in the last couple of years, had exploits that allowed people to use the fact that you had Norton on your computer as a pathway into the administrator account on your computer.
And that's a good point, Alex, because I just was working on a computer earlier. Yes, I don't just play video games, folks. I do work just remotely, and that's why I have my space station set up here so that I can do both at the same time. So I was working on a computer and they had WebRoot installed from Geek Squad. Obviously, that's Best Buy's antivirus of choice. Nothing wrong with WebRoot. I like WebRoot. It does a perfectly fine job as far as I'm concerned. And the problem is when these antiviruses expire and they're not being updated and they have holes that are inside of them that somebody can exploit and get in that computer, then that's doing it. No, it would be better to have that thing uninstalled in Defender, Windows or Microsoft, whatever you want to call it, running in the background, at least doing some sort of protection. Because a lot of times these antivirus companies will actually stop Windows Defender from working. It's getting better. A lot of them are actually allowing Windows Defender to run in the background, do a periodic scan, all that kind of stuff. But a lot of times it will shut whatever else is on the system down. All right. Let's go on to the next one, man. That was just antivirus. We got a whole list here. All right. Cloud email security or advanced threat protection. So, Alex, I'm going to kick it off to you. What do you use for cloud email security when you're trying to secure those emails, which is a very unsecure space?
Yeah, email is a big issue, especially these days, as we touched on. So it depends on where the client is hosting their email. If they're at Office 365, or what's now called Microsoft 365, everything's becoming Microsoft something, right?
Exactly.
Then I like to use advanced threat protection because it integrates really well. And in the last year, it's really come along in its capabilities. It's got the ability to sanitize suspicious looking emails, links, attachments. The false positive rate is exceedingly low. And the amount of rules that you can build into the framework to decide where that quarantined email is going to go, how it's going to be treated, are quite flexible. Now, if they're not in Microsoft and they don't have the luxury of advanced threat protection, then I like to use Proofpoint. It affords a similar level of protection. It's pretty fair in terms of cost, and the support people tend to be great if you have any issues that the client's not able to get an email from a certain sender and you can't figure it out. They'll come in, they'll help smooth it out. So those two, depending on where the client is, tend to be my main picks.
Okay. Paco?
So I also use Proofpoint for Office 365 and G Suite. I also use, or do I use? No, I'm sorry. I don't have Proofpoint on G Suite just yet. Proofpoint on Office 365. But what I do use on both is a company called Cyberfish to do anti-phishing. So I would probably compare them to Iron Scales. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of that vendor, but they're very similar where they have a very big AI technology, quote unquote, that allows to compare screenshot images of when they are seeing detecting the emails. So in essence, if it looks the same, but if it realizes, the email's wrong and then the image is shifted to the left by accident, or it is coming from the user, but it's weirdly formatted compared to a standard Office 365 email or a Google or a PayPal or a bank email, it flags it and then it's able to bring it into the phishing detection. So that's kind of what I've been using so far. I actually been trying it out for the past maybe month and a half. Because I was using Iron Scales before, but they're startup. They're growing very aggressively, and they are trying to create as many integrations as possible when detecting these type of threats to integrate into a lot of the PSAs or help desk software that a lot of IT businesses have.
Okay. And as far as I don't do a whole lot of email for residential clients, so Even a lot of my managed services, even though I take care of their networks and their computers, a lot of times they've already been set up with email, and we've just never gotten to that point. So, they're usually using something with a domain pointed to. It's usually either Office 365 or, but it's not, unfortunately, it's not always the regular Office 365. A lot of times it'll be the one where you get, you can install it on 5 different machines, which is really the home user type. So yeah. All right. So third one is, and this is a big one, and this is really starting to come to light a lot more, is authentication and password security. Alex, what are you using?
For that one, it really depends on the client. We have some preferences. We like to try to keep it offline where we can, because a lot of the big password management providers, there was a big disclosure about 2 weeks ago about this, are not really securing that data very well. There's a lot of ways to exfiltrate passwords. Sometimes they're hashed, but they're not salted, so you can break them pretty easily and gain access to all of that. So we like to recommend KeePass, and you can set it up on a shared drive like OneDrive or Google Drive, or on a local SMB server, to be able to share and collaborate and keep those passwords synced in relatively real time. And you're afforded the ability of having that information encrypted and controlled in an environment where you have a little bit more data security. That being said, for clients that are kind of married to the "I want everything in the cloud" idea, and they don't want to have a client, or they maybe don't like something about KeePass, we like to recommend OnePass or LastPass, depending on what they're more comfortable or familiar with. I mean, often is the case, we find that they have some preference, and we try to marry that with best practices.
Very good. Paco.
So we are actually using Bitwarden for our password management and 2FA.
And why do you like those products?
Because they're easy and damn near dumb simple.
Okay. I like that.
But yeah, no, I think for me specifically, the way that it combines the 2FA under the login makes it easier. So you just got to make sure when you 2FA the password manager, you do it with a different 2FA app. So basically I have Bitwarden basically for everything in its mother. And then I have my 2FA to Bitwarden with Authy.
Okay. So I guess that's the only thing that kind of gets me. And when it comes to authentication, I've used things. I wanted to use LastPass, because actually LastPass is what I use for password security, and it's what I recommend to my clients, just because I know how it works. And so therefore, when I'm trying to troubleshoot it or teach somebody how to do it, I can show them how to do it. The authentication portion, I wanted to have, again, all in one. So I started up on LastPass. And when I did that, I had it on a phone that I didn't realize I forgot to click the backup portion on my old phone. So when I went to my new phone, I was like going, wait a minute, why do I not have any of my authentication keys here to, get into any of my sites? And so fortunately, I will, whenever I'm switching phones, as long as my phone's working, I usually leave everything installed, because these are little things that you forget sometimes. So I went back into my phone and I was able to click the backup button, and it backed everything up, and I was able to use it. Unfortunately, and I don't know, and maybe there's a workaround that you guys know of, but I'm not able to use LastPass for everything. Some things will actually require things like Authy or Google Authenticator. And so there's really not a whole lot you can do except use either one of those, which again, you're kind of spreading this authentication out. And I know a lot of people will be like, well, I just use my text messages, which is probably a good backup way to have your stuff there, because in case something happens, I don't know how many of you have taken your, taken one-time passcodes and actually copied them and stored them away safely in a file to go, what the heck does that one go to? Because I've got a stack of papers, and not every one of them has exactly what site it goes to. So I'm not really sure what passcodes they're looking for. There's not really an easy solution as far as I'm concerned when it comes to that stuff. Anyways, I use LastPass just because I like the interface of LastPass. It's pretty.
I wanted to chime in, and Alan Miller in the YouTube chat said, separate your password storage and your 2FA storage. I would agree. That's best practices wherever you can do that, just so that there's not one source to get everything. So, when we're using KeePass or LastPass with a client, we tend to recommend using Authy. Google Authenticator recently had an issue where it wasn't properly securing the data it was storing, and it was actually from a development standpoint, it was really just one box they had to check to make sure that other Android apps couldn't grab the Google Authenticator private key, and they didn't do that. And so that was a big problem and actually went back years. But yeah, having those separated is a good, it's what I would consider a best practice.
You guys are killing my dream here, man. Everything all under one pane of glass. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we know that's not a reality. So if you had to pick one that would work with everything out there, if there is such a thing, which one would it be?
You're trying to get me in trouble, Jeff.
Paco, anything?
I'm sticking with my Bitwarden. I think I got it's pretty set up. I've researched the company. I'm pretty confident on that setup. So
now, as far as Bitwarden, now, so you're able to, you can't use it for everything though, right?
Correct, right. So like there's certain basically, I think that's just the technology of how it's set up on some of the things. I know that there's way to do some configurations and backends for certain things, like getting Duo to work with Office 365, or I'm sorry, Microsoft 365 and things like that. But it just really depends on if there's that configuration or the ability to do so. Like for example, Cylance, it doesn't have a true 2FA per se as far as with an app. You have to set up an SSO setup to get access to the platform and then remove the password setup so that no one can log in directly through the panel. It's through whatever you're using as your single sign-on.
Okay. And I will say that the one thing I would use Google Authenticator, to be honest with you, and it would be fine, except that there's no way to back it up other than the one-time passcodes. And you would have to do that for each of the logins that you have. And it's just kind of a pain, but unfortunately I have to use it on a couple things because I'm tired of downloading all these different things to actually use on my phone. And even though I use LastPass, I have 333 passwords saved in there, all different. And so it becomes a big pain to sometimes find that stuff. No, LastPass makes it pretty easy, but I'm getting tired of logging into stuff. I really am. It's getting I'm getting login fatigue. Is that a thing?
It is. In fact, we're entering an era where passwords at some point in the not too distant future may be part of our past.
That would be nice. So let's move on to the next subject, which maybe this might be one of those. Maybe it might not be. Biometrics. Alex, do you use personally or in your business any biometrics of any sort at this point?
Well, sometimes we'll encounter situations. I mean, we all have phones, and a lot of them use fingerprint authentication, so we can't really get away from that. And you got the Apple phones with the face authentication. So I think we're all in one way or another kind of dealing with biometrics. There's the laptops that have the fingerprint sensors. There's the entryway authentication for some of the more sophisticated door lock systems that have some kind of biometrics, whether it's optical or fingerprint or otherwise. In terms of like day to day, I'm unlocking my phone with my fingerprint, so I'm definitely dealing with that. For clients, I don't tend to recommend biometrics just because, from a cybersecurity perspective, unless it's your second factor, it tends to be something that can be overcome. So a lot of the fingerprint sensors don't have enough points. They're not like recognizing your finger in the level of detail that your fingerprint actually has. So there's ways to overcome them. And often is the case that you're leaving some trace, some oil as to where your actual fingerprint is depressing on that sensor the last time you did it. And a sophisticated attacker, and again, you're talking about a pretty high level attack, but there are ways to exfiltrate that print and then to wear it and authenticate as that person. So I'm not a big fan yet. I think that it will get there. I don't think we're that far off, but as of yet, not really encouraging biometrics.
Paco?
Nope.
You don't use it at all on your personal devices?
I mean, I have like the Face ID on my personal cell phone, and I do have like the Windows Hello, whatever it's called, Hello Me, Hello
Yeah.
through the camera, which makes it pretty simple. But a majority of it is just controlled through MFA through Jump Cloud, and I kind of just do it through that way.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, I'll use. I'll tell you what. Once I started using a fingerprint reader on my S7 Edge, now I've got an S20. I can't go back. It's putting in the 4-digit PIN sucks, and I'm definitely not using my face because I'd be looking at my phone funny, and it probably wouldn't open up anyways. But it is funny, Paco, because I actually with this Brio webcam, I do use Windows Hello, and it works flawlessly. Believe it or not, I'm like, I can't believe how well it works. I sit down in front of my computer, and as long as I'm looking at it, it doesn't matter what face I give it, it kind of opens up. And I've had other people sit in front of it, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't do anything. I'm like, this is interesting.
Which camera did you have?
The Logitech Brio,
Brio.
Brio. And so, yeah, because you have to have a Windows Hello type webcam or whatever. And so I use a fingerprint reader. I just got my wife using a fingerprint reader on her phone, and she loves it because it's just you place your finger down. Now, the only bad thing is I'm in maintenance, and my right thumb, which I use all the time, sometimes gets missing pieces of skin, and it doesn't actually track right. So that's why I take a couple of other digits and make sure that they're also readable. The little things. All right, let's go into email continuity. Now, when I say email continuity, and I guess I don't know why I didn't look this one up. What does that mean to you, Alex? Email continuity.
Well, typically is the case, and I'll just preface this by saying SMTP is a pretty forgiving protocol. So if you're not able to get an email to the server, it will try for at least another 72 hours if it's adherent to the standards for the protocol. So typically, if you have an outage, you're still going to get the mail. There's just going to be a delay depending on the nature of the outage and if there's any error message getting kicked back or if it's just not responding at all. But that being said, it's good to have email continuity to be able to capture and reduce the chance of loss. So what we do, we have an instance in AWS and in Azure, which is just a very simple postfix based mail server. You spin it up, you add a mail record, so it's a lower priority MX record. And then if mail comes in and it can't get to the main server, it's going to go to that secondary server and then reflect back to the main when it's reachable again. And it's a pretty simple setup. It's de minimis in cost, and where clients need that, we're happy to offer it. That being said, when you're talking about these cloud-based big boys, the Googles, the Microsofts of the world, they have a really pretty robust uptime. So when they have downtime, the whole world notices, and they're under immense pressure to get things back up and running as soon as they can. So I haven't really had a lot of clients with Office 365 or Google Mail, needing that kind of backup. It's usually either the on-prem or the self-hosted cloud email clients that need that.
Okay. Paco, anything to add?
Can you use it in a sentence?
Email continuity. No, I can't. All right, let's move on from there. So let's talk about encryption. Alex, what are you using for encryption?
Well, it depends on the context, right? So if we're talking about a computer's hard drive and it's a Microsoft computer, we're going to default to BitLocker. It works well. It's integrated. It doesn't slow things down much, especially on these modern computers that have AES acceleration built in. When you're talking about a Mac, File Vault is just fine. Similar kind of setup. It's standard. It's built in. And then when you're talking about sending files back and forth, Proofpoint has email encryption that one can use that works pretty well. There's products like Zix too, depending on what your industry is. Some industries like finance are very much into Zix, so you kind of have to use it to be compatible with the others. Of course, there's PGP as well, which is not quite as popular as it used to be, but it's still out there in the ether on the email side of things. And then there's a lot of products where it's kind of built in, right? So if you're looking at end-to-end communication on SharePoint using OneDrive, things are supposed to be encrypted both in transit and at rest. So that's good that it's kind of built into the stack, as it were. And then when you're looking at websites, you just tick on TLS 1.3. If you're hosting an e-commerce site or something like that, you can maximize the standards at which encrypted information is sent back and forth. So it kind of depends on the context of the encryption. But when we're talking about policies with a client, even if they don't have any level of compliance, we do try to encourage encryption both at rest and in transit wherever it's reasonably possible, that it doesn't hinder workflow, and especially where there's any sensitive data being sent back and forth.
Very good answer. Paco.
So it's funny. It's actually, I do all of the above of what Alex does. So for Windows PCs, BitLocker. If it is Mac, we also use the Firewall for the encryption of that. We use Proofpoint for our encryption. We actually used to use Zix encryption, which both are very good. Both, I would say Zix was a lot easier to set up than Proofpoint was. But once I got the Proofpoint thing kind of figured out, it kind of works really well, especially with their new dashboard that they have going. And Proofpoint you can purchase through Pax8, which ends up integrating into Synchro, so that helps my PSA with my billing and stuff. It helps automate all that. As far as end-to-end communication, I'm using OneDrive or depending on what they are in G Suite, but we also are trying out Data Workplace, which is for some of our bigger clients that have some convoluted naming constructions that OneDrive can't handle.
The old Microsoft file tree. Yeah. Okay. So I was going to say.
So hold on. I actually got one question for Alex though. Do you manage the BitLocker keys and Firewall keys for your clients? And if so, where do you store them?
We try to, where it's advantageous to the client. It kind of depends on the depth of the relationship. And we have a key pass both for our own data as well as for our client data. So we tend to put that data in the client key pass.
Excellent. Good question, Paco. All right. I was going to say, yeah, I use BitLocker because these Mac or, PCs you talk about or Apple, whatever. Is that still a thing? I don't know. Stocks are dropping, man.
It is a thing. And it's a pain in my rear too, because I have a client that just switched all 70 of their endpoints from PC to Mac. So that was fun.
What were they smoking? Holy cow. Okay. Well, anyways, it's kind of like, the Linux people. Sorry, Alex.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
All right, let's go into what about firewalls, hardware and software? Alex, what are you using?
So that's a scale issue. If we're talking about a Fortune 1000 client, we tend to prefer Palo Alto. They're really robust firewalls. They offer, really second to none protection, very robust, and they have a lot of other features that are built in that can help. If we're talking about a smaller client, say 100 people or less, we like to look at pfSense. It's a FreeBSD-based firewall system. It's incredibly functional. It offers all the enterprise features at a fraction of the cost. The hardware is off the shelf. You could pretty much take any computer, and as long as it has a multi-port NIC and it's well supported, Intel's generally going to be the better ones for that. But yeah, pfSense is great. They just released version 2.45 that made things just a little smoother and updated a lot of the components like Suricata. So if you're doing intrusion detection, which I think at this point everyone really needs to be doing, both going in and out, that has gotten a lot faster. It's taking up less CPU time to analyze traffic. I mean, I've got it running on a gigabit pipe here, and even when I'm pushing, maximum throughput, it's not maxing out a relatively older 4-core AMD processor that's both power efficient, kind of built for mobile workloads. So I like pfSense for that. I also like it because you're supporting a community. There's a lot of great people involved with the pfSense development. So if you have a question, you can pop on Reddit. There's actual developers from pfSense there that'll answer your questions and even consider good feature requests. So that tends to be my recommendation. And even for residential users, if they're serious about their security or if they're handling sensitive information at home, it can drop right in just about any connection.
Paco.
So we are actually using Untangle for our firewalls. We were purchasing them directly with Untangle. But now we are using a different type of firewall device and just manually installing it white label. So we've been using that probably now for the past, when was TechCon? It was August? No, September. So September. So we've been using it since then. They were really helpful to us in getting some of the training materials and kind of getting the word out. They have a great training academy on their portal. They do integrate with, if you are using Malwarebytes endpoint protection or webroot, they just announced, you're able to, if anything comes up and flags on any of their firewall logs, you have the ability of actually sending a scan directly to the endpoint if you wanted to from there. And that's really what we've been using. From some of our smaller clients, we would just put in the untangled device, and then we wait until they realize that they really need it because of some type of compliance or whatever, and we slap on the subscription and they're good to go.
All right, excellent. And also, I will mention that I believe Tom Lawrence over on his YouTube channel also has a nice tutorial on the PF Sense, along with many various different products, and he does a lot of open source stuff. So if you want to get the skinny on that, you can definitely check that out over there. Yeah, as far as firewalls, I don't really use anything in here. I'm just not a big firewall person personally now, and I don't have any clients that I have to have that type of compliance or anything like that. So yeah, I'm a fan of all of them. You know, whatever's going to work in your situation. It's definitely one of those things where I would definitely try it out on your own system and see what's going to best work for you. All right, let's talk about VLANing on your network. Alex, what would be the point of somebody VLANing on their router, firewall, etc.?
I think it really is a matter of how your network is set up. You know, you can physically segment network components, and that's usually the best thing to do if you're afforded the opportunity. If you can't physically segment, then you can set up a virtual LAN. And let's say you've got Internet of Things devices, and you know, who really knows what's going on in those black boxes at any given time? Most of the time, they're shipped out with vulnerable firmware. You know, a lot of the vendors, and it's not meant as a slight against them, but they don't update their firmware as often as there are vulnerabilities discovered. A lot of them are using embedded Linux. So, you know, embedded Linux gets updated. Hackers know what's vulnerable in embedded Linux. They start weaponizing exploits for it, but the IoT devices remain unpatched. So it's often the best to try to segment those onto a separate network. It's also good to make sure that your wireless network is not in any way connected to your wired network where you're afforded that luxury. Now, obviously, not all networks are built the same, and in some situations, you need to have the wireless users touching and talking to those wired devices. But ultimately, it's best to try to segment those as well. So VLANs are good for that. Most of the time, I'm going to be setting that up at the switch level so that it's going to be delegated by a managed switch that's going to have the ports, kind of quarantined, to use some COVID-19 lingo, for the appropriate resources that they need to have access to.
Paco, what about you and VLANs?
I hate them, but I have to use them because I have a lot of clients that exactly like what Alex says. Normally, we try to do the topology on a stick, which is a terminology that I've come to learn through a lot of the Snap AV's training for a lot of their gear, and which is what we use. But like you said, I mean, it's really just trying to set up in different ways. IoT is one. Two, we have one or two clients that are actually co-working spaces. So having the ability of keeping those VLANs separate, but also having the ability to print or to access the public Wi-Fi, but the public Wi-Fi not accessing certain, internal operations or each individual office and stuff like that. So those would be my examples of when VLANs can be helpful in that type of situation.
Okay. And I also use the Arachnus or Snap AV gear. And I segment mine for my business side, my personal side, and obviously the IoT device side, just to keep all that stuff separate through my, switch and router and wireless access point. Just makes everything so that, again, it's just a layer. It's another layer of security. It's not the end all be all, but it is something to segment your stuff. And Alex is right when it comes to the IoT stuff. Even stuff that's maybe came out and it was good, a lot of times stuff is not getting updated, and exploits are coming out all the time for this stuff. So, you get what you pay for, and I say part of it's our problem because we as consumers are ultra cheap, and we don't really want to pay for the robust ability to do the right things. And these companies know that. So in order to make your life easier, everybody loves their Alexa or whatever. Actually, mine doesn't say that anymore. I named it computer. And so it's kind of Star Trek-ish. I can say, computer, what time is it? Like I can't look at my watch or my phone or, the stove. I don't know. Anyways.
I tell Sam Jackson to tell me my stuff.
There you go. That's awesome. But yeah, in VLANing might seem ultra complicated, but it's not really complicated depending on the gear. With the Snap AV gear, it's actually very easy to do unless you forget to click one button or another, then it can cause problems, which you have to figure out after a while. So, all right, let's go ahead and talk about, intrusion detection systems. All right, so something is intruding your system. What would be classified, Alex, as something that would come in and figure out, hey, I'm getting somebody's trying to hit my system here, and do you use anything to log any of that information?
Absolutely. And it helps a lot, especially when you get into a situation where you're tracking threat metrics, you're trying to figure out what's trying to get into your system, or if something does, it gives you a more robust audit trail to determine what happened and who may have been behind it. And I even take it a step further from intrusion detection to intrusion prevention. So Suricata is my IPS or IDS of choice. And it integrates well with that firewall I mentioned, pfSense. So the ideal setup is that you figure out the rules that you want to have. Every environment's a little different, so a different rule set might be a little bit more apropos for one than the other. But once you have your rules set up and they're not generating false positives and blocking legitimate traffic, then you can actually start to set it up so that it's automatically blocking those high and medium risk traffic patterns. And so it gets ahead of the idea of IDS, because IDS is just going to kind of ping you and say, hey, something bad is happening. You might want to take a look at this. But what system administrator or network administrator realistically has the time to, in real time, pay attention to that flow of traffic? And if it's a network with more than 10 people, it can be pretty overwhelming. So IPS takes it to the next level and says, hey, if this is a high risk attack vector, let's automatically block it. We'll send out an alert. We'll describe what IP address and port and protocol we're blocking and what rule that's being attributed to. That way, if you find that if for some reason there are false positives, you can disable that or tweak that rule. And then Suricata also allows you to have alerts. So instead of blocking traffic, you can set things up to send you an alert. Maybe something looks like a DDoS attack, and obviously you can't have something block a DDoS attack if it's overwhelming your traffic by the time it's at your router. It's a little too late. But you can at least get a heads up that, hey, something suspicious is happening. And you might want to have those same kind of alerts for peer-to-peer traffic. If the employees look like they're sharing files they shouldn't, you might not want to automatically block it because there might be the potential for a false positive, but having that alert is constructive. But Suricata is kind of the successor of Snort in a lot of ways. And Snort was an open source, very popular intrusion detection system for some time. And while it's still great, and while the rule sets are still very prescient, I found that Suricata is a little bit more low on the overhead side. So its performance tends to be good under very high workloads. And as I was mentioning, I have it on a gigabit pipe. It's only using a 4-core, 2.4 gigahertz AMD processor, and it's not maxing out the GPU when there's complex or high bandwidth traffic loads.
Very good. Paco, what are you using?
I'm using Untango's IPS and IDS systems, and then the other cool thing about that I have is I have Cylance's optics, which allows me to, so for example, in the scenario, the firewall flags that there's some outbound connection to a Russian IP address for some reason. And so what optics has, but you can't figure it out. It's just something's, let's say 4 times in the month is a scenario. And so with Cylance optics, you have the ability to go in there, type in the IP address. You realize that the IP address was coming from a Skype system from a particular PC. So in this scenario that was presented to me, is it was a client that had a sales manager that came in once a month, and in that month he happened to come in 4 times to speak with the Russian team. That was all. So it wasn't an actual a breach per se, but it had the ability of dialing in granularity to figure out where it is. So I'm using those two in combination, but the IDS and the IDP and IPS is mainly through the apps through Untangle.
Okay.
And I forgot what they upgraded to, because they used to use Snort, but they upgraded to something else. I don't know if it's the tool that Alex mentioned or if there was another one that they moved to. I'd have to go back to the show that we had them on, which was way back when.
Okay. Very good. Okay, so let's see. What do we got here? Let's go over this row. So logging and auditing. Alex, what are you using to log and audit what's going on your clients' networks and computers and et cetera?
Sure. Logging is an interesting one because the need to log and how things are logged is going to vary on a network by network and server by server basis. Linux is using syslog, and there's more standard open source tools for something like that, or for FreeBSD. Windows is using the event log function, which is a lot different than what Windows is logging with. Splunk is a great tool to be able to track logs, to be able to analyze them, be able to generate alerts. So that's one we like to use. In terms of auditing, I look at auditing a little bit different in terms of, my vernacular. To me, it means vulnerability assessment. So for vulnerability assessment, there's a whole lot of tools out there. What I like to recommend people start with to see if they're really interested in doing vulnerability assessment, because there's a lot involved and it's quite a deep field. It's almost a whole practice in of itself. But Kali Linux is a great auditing tool. It comes with a whole lot of different frameworks that one can use. When you're doing scans, you can start your discovery process with something like Nmap. When you've identified vulnerable attack surface, you can quantify that by using something like Metasploit. And there's just a lot of different tools in there that are used both by amateurs and professionals alike, and the whole thing is free, so the value is very good.
Like it.
Kind of going back off, we use Silent Optics to do a lot of the auditing, and if an issue were to arise, and it's funny how, exactly like what Alex mentioned, when I hear auditing, I'm thinking of, tracking and identifying inventory for a client site, and which would be the RMM. We use Overseer Pro to identify all the inventory that's in a particular site. Domots, who we had previously, I have at a couple sites that give into more granularity for some of those details of things. But those are the three tools that I'm using as far as auditing inventory for my clients and understanding what is on the network.
All right, very good. All right, let's go into, we got a couple more left here. And this is probably a number one hot topic that a lot of people would love to do and can't figure out how to do that in a way that makes sense for them and their clients. And that is internet security awareness training. Alex, how in the world do you do that when people can't even pay attention for 2 seconds?
I think the first thing that's really important is making whatever you're training on relatable. So real world examples, actual things that have happened. One thing that happened recently was there's a real estate developer whose accountant got an email requesting a $400,000 wire transfer. And it ended up looking like it was from an actual vendor. And because they deal with those levels of bills on the regular, and because the treasurer was interested, or the accountant was interested in trying to please their boss expediently, they wired the funds. And that's a situation where it's really easy to get around. So real world examples, but also simple techniques to mitigate risk. So in that situation, you say, hey, pick up the phone. Call the other party. Did they actually send that bill? Call your boss. Are they authorizing that payment? Takes 5 minutes, doesn't need any advanced technology. We all know how to do it. So I try to make it as relatable. The other thing that we like to do in those situations where we're afforded the opportunity is actually interview staff, get a kind of baseline of what their awareness levels are. So we make sure we're training on the weak points, make sure we're training on the things that they don't know, those are their problems. Because about 50% of breaches happen from a human insecurity element. So if we can identify that sort of soft spot and really train on it effectively, I think that's another area to add value.
Very good. Paco?
So what we've done is a couple things. So we actually took this from John Dubinsky over at the Maven Group, where he would send basically a 60-second newsletter. And he would send that every month, and it would basically be on some topic. And if it would only take 60 seconds to read. So we've done that for a few times. We've also enlisted in a vendor called Breach Secure Now, which also offers unlimited training as well for a pretty fair price for all clients. And we've started implementing some of those modules for our clients as well. So as you mentioned, training is not only difficult to make sure you get across to the client, depending on the conversations and just human nature and things like that, especially now, where you need to really educate your clients to really pay attention, because the scams are going to be up quite a bit now. But it's the time that it takes as the tech or the IT business owner to implement these campaigns as well. So if you're not charging for this, or you have an all-you-can-eat plan, or if you just threw in there and said, hey, we'll just do a phishing campaign for you, and thinking that it's very simple to do, understand that there's a lot of work and time invested in it, which is why this tends to be a subject that a lot of people just don't implement, because there's so many other things that they could probably address in that time frame. Although this, I believe, is a valuable tool that needs to be done.
I agree. All of the above. And one of the things that I really believe that Alex already brought to light was that you need to make it relatable. And even on the residential side, my first reaction is carry a big stick or a ruler and something to smack their knuckles with. I don't know. A lot of face palms to yourself, not to your clients. But the reality is you got to understand that people really don't know what they don't know. And there are a lot of people out there that don't want to learn. And so in a loving, kind way, you have to be able to teach them from a practical standpoint. For example, if somebody says, oh, I don't know, why do I need to back up my pictures? And this could be files, this could be documents. It doesn't really matter. Well, if it's pictures from the residential side and you have 20 years worth of digital photos, do you have those copied anywhere? Well, no. So what would happen if that hard drive just decided to up and die and you lost all those files right now? What would happen? I'd be devastated. Okay, that's why you need to back up, because you would be devastated. So you just stated what would happen in a nice way. Now, a lot of times people they don't understand, and they don't understand things like the cloud. And a lot of times we try to make things way too complicated for somebody. Somebody doesn't even care really what type of operating system they're operating. They don't care whether it's Windows, whether it's Mac, whether it's whatever, or iOS, whatever, whatever it might be. They don't care. It's their phone, it's their computer, it's their tablet. That's all they know. Name brands and all that, they don't care. So you've got to be able to explain things so that the vast majority of people understand what you're trying to do. And you got to do it in a nice way, for the most part. Sometimes you got to be, you got to have a little tough love every once in a while. But, you try to be good. Oh, all right. Let's move on. And let's see. And we'll go into, I think we covered everything. So the last one is going to be, and this is very, very important for today's day and age and what we're having to do now, virtual private networks, or VPNs. Alex, what are you using?
So going back to pfSense for a moment, it has a number of different VPNs built in. The two that we favor using are IPsec and OpenVPN. Really depends on the client's needs, but you've got kind of two main types of VPNs that clients are going to use: site to site as well as mobile VPN. And so we found that for most scenarios, IPsec is a pretty easy to set up choice. It offers robust functionality. It's got great security. It's very configurable depending on the client's needs. And then OpenVPN is a great number two for us, depending, again, on kind of what the client's needs are. But with pfSense, it's not too complicated to get those VPNs set up. It doesn't do everything for you, so it's a little bit unlike a sonic wall type of firewall where it might add some of those routing rules and firewall rules automatically. There's a little more lifting involved with pfSense. But that being said, it tends to work really well. And with Palo Alto, it's more just kind of drop in and a little bit more plug and play on the VPN side. But the main thing that I would just say is when talking about VPNs, be mindful of what encryption you're using, the strength of your private keys, the strength of your passwords, and everything in between, because there are a lot of vulnerable encryption algorithms that have allowed people to be able to gain access. And also on the same note, make sure you're patching your firmware, because a lot of these routers have vulnerabilities, and some of those vulnerabilities pertain to the security of your VPN. And just from a cybersecurity perspective, and this is kind of one of those advanced threat groups, Iran has been going out and hacking as many VPNs as they possibly can. They're using them to stage attacks. They're using them to exfiltrate data. And so you want to be mindful of the strength of your encryption, the recentness of that firmware. And of course, if your device is not getting updates anymore, it's time to replace it.
I couldn't agree more. Paco?
Which is why you don't use consumer grade stuff at your small businesses clients, FYI, because they don't patch worth a damn for X amount of years. But anyway, we use OpenVPN for a majority of our clients because it is set up both on our Untangle boxes or our Arachnus routers that we haven't had a chance to replace with firewalls. For clients that have a very terrible internet connection, AT&T. Basically what we do is, and if they don't need to have access to any shares or anything like that, we'll set them up with ExpressVPN.
Okay, very good. And so I use OpenVPN through the Arachnus gear also. Again, dead simple to set up unless you forget to check the little box that says turn on. But other than that, and this is why I say you really need to learn your equipment backwards and forwards and upside down so that you can know when you run into problems, because a lot of times when you're having to learn something, it's on your dime, not your customers. So I think with that, why don't you guys go ahead and think about any last minute things that maybe we haven't covered in this list. There were some other things that I kind of omitted because we kind of covered them a little bit here and there, and I think we covered a lot. But if there's anything left that you want to speak to as far as security for your client base, let's go ahead and wrap that up now. And Alex, we'll kick it off with you.
Sure. So in terms of items that I think are really important and aren't discussed enough, there's two that I'd like to bring up. The first is DNS blacklisting. And this has become a really powerful tool to mitigate risk. And basically what a DNS blacklist is it's a list of host names and domains that are known to be bad for various reasons. So you've got malware lists. It shows domains and host names that are actively involved in distributing malware. You've got lists of telemetry gathering hosts that are involved with exfiltrating information that might be private. You've got lists of advertising hosts and domains that might be involved with showing advertisements. And if you cut off all ads, you save about 40% of your bandwidth on the web. So that could be helpful for, the constricted clients are the ones that just want to reduce the amount of distraction out there. But a DNS blacklist, the biggest component of it that's very helpful is it's making sure that whatever is out there doesn't even get to your computer in the first place. So we talked about malware protection and how it's reactive. That's all well and good, but like Jeff said, a lot of stuff can get through that. Once it's already there, it's already a problem in a lot of cases. But with DNS blacklisting, if it's blocking a host, that traffic never happened. It's basically said, hey, whatever that IP address it was supposed to resolve to, it's a non-writable IP. You can't talk to it. You can't touch it. Maybe you get a whole warning page saying, why that's been blocked. So DNS blacklisting is one. The other is a kind of two terms that are a little bit interchangeable: IP blacklisting and a subset of that, geo fencing. So IP blacklisting is the same concept of DNS blacklisting, except for you're talking about IP addresses individually or ranges of IP addresses. And then geo IP fencing is like saying, hey, if 80% of these attacks are originating from China, maybe we'll just block their IP space if we don't have to do business with them. And that can significantly reduce the amount of attacks that your IP space is seeing. If you ever look at a connection and you're looking at your IPS or IDS, or you're just doing a raw traffic dump, you can see that these types of attacks are hitting several times a second. And a lot of them are coming from Chinese or Russian IP space, and nothing against the two countries. I'm sure there's, all kinds of great intentions and most of the people there, but there are some really bad actors there, and they have some very sophisticated zero-day attacks they're weaponizing in the wild. So, fencing that off, having the IP blacklists of the known hosted or distributing malware, the DNS blacklists of the same. And if you can't do that at your business, there's great providers that are able to offer it kind of outsourced. So Cloudflare just rolled out their malware blacklisting service. Quad9 DNS has something that's similar to that. And just to kind of piggyback on that for 1 second, since we're talking about DNS, having security for your DNS is also important. So what that means is, typically DNS traffic is sent over UDP. UDP is not encrypted, and it's not in any way verified, which means it's very easy to get in the middle of it and spoof DNS so that someone can maybe querying Google and they visit an entirely different website. But there's a way to encrypt that. There's actually a couple different ways to encrypt. The way I prefer is DNS over TLS. Wherever that option is afforded, and going back to pfSense, you can set up its unbound resolver to resolve DNS over TLS. Then you get that verification, you get encryption, you get security. It makes it harder for your ISP to spy on what you're doing. It also makes it harder for those bad actors to be able to jump in the middle and mess with that connection.
I like it. Very good. And yes, that was a very important one that we did miss in our list. So thank you for bringing that up. Paco, any last thoughts?
Yeah, one additional service that makes DNS filtering very easy is clean browsing. You have the ability to do a lot of the geofencing. You can filter by country, filter by apps, and it helps with exactly like an example that Alex mentioned was like restricting certain things in a business. Like if you don't want them to watch YouTube or only moderate details of YouTube to be played, no Facebook, no WhatsApp, connecting to the network, things of that nature. Clean browsing has it pretty easy to set all that up. And then the only other thing I would add to the list is blacklist IP monitoring for domains and things of that nature. We use a company called Heatrix Tools, and that allows to monitor 25 of the spam lists, make sure that the domains and IP addresses are not blacklisted on any of those sites. And if they are, you get an alert to investigate why are they being blacklisted for that reason for your client.
Very good. Yeah, and I will third the DNS. I've been using OpenDNS for I don't know what it's called now, Umbrella or something like that. I think it's owned by Cisco. And so basically, I've been using it for a long time on my own personal network, and I've been through 5 teenagers in this household. And I say this a lot. I have not had a virus since. Now, let me preface this: an actual virus. We don't really see too many of those anymore, other than the ransomware stuff, but an actual virus since the 2002. And I know a lot of people go, how do you know? Because I actually work on my own computers too, people. And so, I know what's on here, and I know what's happening. And having teenagers that go to all kinds of gaming sites and different things like that, just having even simple DNS where you can turn off where it's not going to go to proxies and all that kind of stuff will make your night. It's just a night and day difference. And a lot of it you can do very affordably. And like Paco said, there's a lot of better companies out there now with clean browsing and stuff like that can do that stuff very inexpensively. And it's well worth it. Again, it's just that other layer of security that's going to help stuff before it ever gets, and I love to do it at the router level. I don't do it at the computer level because that way everything that's going through my router and switches and wireless access points are basically blocking all that stuff out. So with that being said, Alex, I appreciate all the plethora of knowledge you brought to us today. And thank you for making it fun and entertaining, because there's a lot of things where I had done a little bit of research and you were able to dive in deep into, security and kind of the things we were talking about, and appreciate all your knowledge and the different products that you use. If people want to get more information from you or about you, where could they go?
You can visit our company at Envescent.com. We also have a Twitter feed at twitter.com/Envescent, where we're regularly posting updates and alerts. And we also have a company page on LinkedIn. I want to say it's LinkedIn/in/Envescent, but don't hold me to that. But we do try to regularly post information on our website as well. We have an actively curated, we call it a library. It's basically a fancy name for a blog. right? And we're posting articles on there. And of late, we've been posting information about how to try to keep companies safer during this new era of telework.
And I think that's it's going to be renamed Microsoft In, I think. I don't know. You heard it here, folks. If it happens, you heard it here. Okay. And Paco, if people want to find out more about you, where would they go?
This fine programming every Sunday evening at 7:30 Eastern Daylight Savings Time. I'll be right here. Same bat channel, same bat time.
Awesome. Glad to have you and all your plethora of information. Thanks for bringing all the goods as usual and all the things that you use in your business. All right, to come, if you can watch, you can watch live and hang out in the chat room if you want, because it's fun. Over on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. You can also subscribe using your favorite podcatcher so you never miss an episode. And I want to thank you for subscribing to the show. We'll see you next time on MSP Unplugged.